Will Africa ever rise as a single, unified voice, a force the world cannot ignore? It's a vision passed down for generations, whispered in freedom songs and resistance chants, but somehow it always feels just out of reach. Why? Because Africa's deepest scar is still division. When one of us is under attack, how often do the rest stand tall in defense? When injustice strikes, how often do we speak as one? Take what happened recently. Burkina Faso's president Ibrahim Traoré was targeted, accused, nearly overthrown. He stood at the edge of a coup. And who among African leaders stood with him? Few. Very few. But one figure did, unexpectedly. A king. Not just any king, but Morocco's King Mohammed VI. A symbol of tradition, yes, but this time, also a bold voice for unity. While others remained silent, he took a stand, not just with comforting words, but with decisive action. He didn't issue statements. He offered something tangible: support. At a moment when Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger were cut off by Western powers and abandoned by their own neighbors, Morocco stepped up. Not with vague promises, but with military cooperation, economic partnerships, and, most importantly, access to Morocco's Atlantic ports. This wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. A pivotal move that could reshape the future of the AES alliance, the alliance of Sahel states, and ignite a real example of African unity. This moment is more than politics. It's a spark, a glimpse of what unity could actually be. Because unity doesn't live in conference rooms. It lives in bold gestures, in moments when one country refuses to let another face fire alone. And maybe, just maybe, the Moroccan king has watered a seed long buried: true African solidarity. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have been pushing back against colonial legacies, reclaiming sovereignty and rebuilding from decades of foreign interference. But while they rebuild, most of their African neighbors have turned their backs. Powerful West African states like Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and Ghana? Silent. Some, worse, complicit. Instead of breaking free from colonial ties, countries like Ivory Coast and Benin have tightened them, inviting France to build military bases and security outposts just across the borders of the AES alliance. This isn't rumor, it's reality. Many believe the failed coup attempt against Traoré on April 16th had links directly to Ivorian territory, backed by foreign interests. This exposed a dangerous divide across Africa, not just about borders or alliances, but about where loyalties truly lie. Are we still clinging to colonial blueprints? Or are we ready to chart a future shaped by African hands? And in the middle of that uncertainty, one North African nation made a different choice. Morocco reached out, not with conditions, not with political traps, but with substance. Military backing, economic offers, and most crucially, port access. For landlocked nations like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, access to the sea isn't just economic, it's survival. Until now, these countries have relied on ports in Benin, Ivory Coast, and Senegal to reach global trade routes. But those paths are now fraught with risk. Benin's recent seizure of Niger's oil at its ports revealed just how unstable and politically driven those partnerships have become. So Morocco stepped in with something game-changing. King Mohammed VI didn't wait for the next summit or diplomatic forum. He offered access to Morocco's Atlantic ports, no strings attached. It was after a high-level meeting in Rabat with foreign ministers from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger that the offer was made official. But the meeting wasn't just about protocol, it was about purpose. Morocco didn't just offer logistics, it offered partnership, a gesture that gave the AES a rare independent connection to the global market, and a powerful alternative to neighbors who had turned hostile. Burkina Faso's foreign minister, Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré, praised the king's action as a reflection of deep African solidarity, genuine and emotional. He didn't just thank Morocco for access, he thanked them for understanding, for standing with the Sahel when others weaponized their struggle. This wasn't about photo ops or Pan-African platitudes. It was real, raw, and revolutionary. Mali's foreign minister, Abdoulaye Diop, called it a transformative move, one that could finally break the isolation that has stifled Sahelian growth for generations. But what struck people most wasn't the policy, it was the empathy. In a world where instability is usually punished with sanctions or threats, Morocco offered understanding. Where others demanded swift returns to civilian rule, Morocco offered respect and a long-term approach. While ECOWAS and other regional powers pushed AES nations with ultimatums, Morocco chose patience, dialogue, and genuine cooperation. And that changes the game entirely. Because Morocco isn't just showing up as another diplomatic actor, it's leading by example, proving that Africa can solve African problems without relying on foreign instructions. But here's what most don't realize. Morocco's offer didn't come out of nowhere. This vision was set in motion back in November 2023. The recent summit in Rabat was not a new decision. It was a promise reaffirmed. Months ago, King Mohammed VI proposed opening Morocco's roads, railways, and ports to Sahel nations on one condition. They must invest in connecting infrastructure, roads, rail links, pipelines that plug directly into Morocco's system, not as charity, as partnership, as strategy, as mutual trust. And according to both Moroccan and Sahelian officials, Morocco is already making good on that promise. This is the beginning of a new African corridor, one that doesn't rely on hostile states or Western routes. A direct trade path, a military support line, and a political alliance rooted in shared interests, not foreign pressure. And for the AES, surrounded, sanctioned, and smeared, this alliance means more than access. It means survival. The King of Morocco may have just redrawn the African map, not with borders, but with bonds. A gesture like this doesn't erase decades of division, but it starts something bigger, something bolder, a new Africa, connected not just by dreams, but by action. Morocco has taken bold steps, canceling debts, waiving customs duties on Sahelian exports, and opening its Atlantic ports to countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. So, what's driving Morocco to act decisively while others remain passive or apply pressure without offering real solutions? It comes down to one clear truth: Morocco sees the bigger picture. The crisis gripping the Sahel didn't start yesterday. The fall of Gaddafi in Libya unleashed a wave of chaos that spilled across borders, threatening to destabilize not just the Sahel, but the entire continent. Morocco understands that if the region collapses, the ripple effects won't be contained. This is Africa's problem, and Morocco is stepping up not as a bystander, but as a concerned neighbor and committed African partner. Some might ask, how does access to Moroccan ports connect to Sahel security? It's a valid question, but it overlooks the core issue. The roots of instability aren't just armed groups and firefights. They're economic. They're structural. They're about a lack of opportunity and connection. Morocco isn't just discussing these issues, it's acting on them. Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita explains that King Mohammed VI's strategy is fundamentally different. While the US, France, and other global powers focus on drones, airstrikes, and counter-terrorism campaigns, Morocco is asking a deeper question: what's fueling the fire in the first place? The king's answer is simple. True security begins with development. Instead of sending troops, Morocco is investing in roads, schools, healthcare, and trade networks. Because in places where despair reigns, violence often follows. Where poverty and isolation define daily life, extremist groups don't need to coerce. They just show up with food, promises, and survival plans. They prey on the forgotten, entire villages with no access to opportunity. And the most disturbing part? Many of their recruits are children, some as young as 7, drawn in not by ideology, but by hunger. But imagine an alternate future. What if those children had schools, clinics and steady homes? What if their parents had jobs and their communities were connected to something bigger than survival? That's the future King Mohammed VI is trying to build, where development is the shield against despair and extremism. And this isn't a recent change in Moroccan policy. It's a continuation of deeply rooted ties with the Sahel, cultural, historical, and personal. Morocco's involvement isn't about global applause. It's about legacy and responsibility. It's about seeing Africa not as a chessboard of influence, but as a shared home where nations rise together or fall together. According to Burita, King Mohammed VI hasn't just spoken about helping the Sahel, he's lived it. His initiatives are not public relations gestures. They're part of a consistent mission that has quietly gained momentum over years. A mission built on African unity. That unity isn't abstract. It's concrete. It's action-based. It means standing with the Sahel when it's under pressure, not pointing fingers or retreating when times get hard. It means stepping in with real help, not waiting for the West to dictate the timeline. It also means believing in the region's potential. Where many see the Sahel as a breeding ground for crisis, the Moroccan king sees promise. He sees a region filled with potential, ready to grow if given the tools. Too often, African leaders, especially those heralded as democratic, remain quiet when AES countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso face crises. They criticize from a distance. They echo Western talking points. Meanwhile, these military-led transitional governments have done something most won't dare. They've reclaimed their sovereignty. They've resisted foreign manipulation. They've prioritized African interests. Remember July 2023? A coup hits Niger. The international community debates intervention, and who responds? Mali and Burkina Faso. They didn't wait for permission. They issued a bold declaration: attack Niger, and you attack us all. At that moment, there was no formal alliance. No military base, just a shared will to defend each other. That was the birth of AES in spirit. Not in diplomacy halls, but in defiance, in courage, under fire. From there, the brotherhood only deepened. And while many continue to criticize or hesitate, Morocco and the Sahel nations are building a future based on action, not on aid or fear. This is the kind of partnership Africa needs. One driven by mutual respect, long-term investment, and the belief that Africans can shape their own solutions. Not through empty pledges, but through shared strength. When Ukraine shocked the world by admitting it had worked with terrorist groups to stage an attack on Mali's military, the response from Burkina Faso and Niger was immediate and uncompromising. There were no lengthy statements, no diplomatic delays. Within hours, both governments expelled Ukrainian diplomats and denounced the aggression in the strongest terms possible. And the West? Silent. No press briefings, no outrage, no condemnation. That silence didn't just echo, it roared. It exposed a truth Africans know too well, a double standard in how international justice is applied. But instead of breaking the alliance of Sahel states, that silence only hardened its unity. While foreign-led bodies like ECOWAS stumbled over internal divisions, the AES isn't rushing. Their focus is elsewhere, securing sovereignty, stabilizing their societies, and carving out African-led solutions to African problems. When Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu and ECOWAS began threatening military intervention, the AES alliance refused to flinch. To them, this wasn't posturing. It was a matter of principle, about dignity and self-respect, about refusing to let outside forces dictate their future. But the pressure didn't stop with words. ECOWAS went further, slapping harsh economic sanctions on all three AES countries. The impact was immediate and brutal. In Nigeria, the backlash was particularly severe. Trade was cut, power was shut off, hospitals went dark, pharmacies emptied, supplies vanished. And then came the real cost, lives lost, not from airstrikes, not from insurgents, but from economic decisions. from a system that pretended to protect democracy but ended up punishing the people instead. Medical equipment failed. Treatments stopped. People died, not because of war, but because of politics. Still, the AES alliance held the line. They didn't beg. They didn't retreat. They stood tall, united by conviction, not convenience. Because for them, this battle isn't about retaining power. It's about shaping a future free from foreign interference, a future built by their own hands. This side of the story rarely makes headlines. But it matters. It matters to the continent. It matters to the world. And if democracy truly means the will of the people, what happens when those people are standing with their military leaders, not against them? Let's be real. These weren't coups that were forced on silent populations. In many cases, they were welcomed. When military leaders took over in Bamako, Ouagadougou, and Niamey, they weren't met with protests. They were met with cheers. Crowds celebrated what they saw as liberation after years of political failure and foreign manipulation. But ECOWAS didn't pause to ask why. It reached for the same old script: sanction, isolate, squeeze, break them into submission, and all of this in the name of democracy. But here's the contradiction. ECOWAS, which punished the AES nations swiftly, said almost nothing when a military coup unfolded in Chad. No threats, no sanctions, just quiet acceptance. Why the inconsistency? It's becoming clearer by the day. This isn't about defending democratic ideals. It's about protecting specific regimes, ones that align with Western interests and don't disrupt the established order. And what about the African Union? When Mali first descended into insecurity, the AU barely lifted a finger. No outreach, no coordination with local leaders, no sincere effort to understand what was driving the crisis. By the time they did arrive, it was too late. Mali had already turned to France for assistance, and that only worsened the situation. Instead of restoring order, foreign troops deepened the chaos. Violence escalated, instability spread, and people felt more betrayed than helped. Now, years later, resentment has replaced hope. The international community's promises are broken, and the region continues to wait, not for more foreign troops, but for leadership that actually understands the ground reality. That's why Morocco stands out. Instead of seeking control, Morocco has offered connection. It has opened ports, forgiven debts, and provided infrastructure, all without hidden agendas. It's not performative. It's practical. It's powerful. This is what real African solidarity looks like. Genuine help with no strings attached. Respect backed by real action. And one truth stands above all. Africa's future, its peace, prosperity, and independence, won't come from outside. It will be built from within. That was the dream of Africa's founding fathers, a continent not split into 54 disconnected states, but a unified force. One mission, one voice, one future. That dream is still alive, but it's up to Africans to turn it into reality. Imagine what's possible if African nations join forces to confront the insurgencies plaguing the Sahel. Imagine intelligence shared, forces combined, resources pooled, not in desperation, but with purpose. If that vision were reality, we wouldn't see the chaos we see now. But instead, too many African governments remain passive, watching, waiting, hoping foreign powers will come to the rescue, again. Even when those powers have shown time and again that their priorities don't align with Africa's needs. So here's the hard question. How can we keep saying African solutions for African problems when Africa keeps abandoning its own neighbors in their hour of need? That's what makes Morocco's actions so meaningful. This wasn't just diplomacy, it was strategy, a long-term vision. While others hesitated or lectured, Morocco listened, acted, and delivered. By giving landlocked AES nations access to the Atlantic, Morocco didn't just give them a path to the ocean. It gave them a path to opportunity, to trade, to independence, to a future they were once denied. And that's not aid, that's empowerment. Those ports are now launch pads, not just for commerce, but for transformation. In a continent where Pan-African unity is often reduced to hashtags or hollow summit speeches, Morocco led by example. Not for applause, not for leverage, but because it was the right thing to do. This is the kind of leadership Africa needs: bold, practical, rooted in brotherhood, not bureaucracy. So yes, credit to Morocco. But imagine what's possible if others follow suit. If more African countries choose unity over silence, solidarity over strategy, teamwork over tokenism. Picture the Africa that could rise, a continent strong, independent, and finally claiming its full voice on the global stage. That future isn't fantasy, it's waiting, but only if we build it together. Let us know what you think. Share your thoughts below, hit that like button, subscribe, and spread this message if you believe in a powerful, united Africa